My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, and this is Mind War. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, welcome back to the Mind War series on magic. Some call it the dark arts, some call it black magic, some call it chaos magic. It doesn't really matter what you call it. A lot of those monikers are used to convey a type of evil upon what we do here. But I promise you this. Magic is what you make of it. Okay? Don't let the labels that society and culture have placed upon it scare you away. Because as we know, there is no fear here in the Mind War. So, folks, for those of you that have been following along, you've seen a major transformation in my life over these last few months. And it's been amazing to share that transformation with you. So in our last series, we worked through the Gateway Experience tapes. We did an entire year on that subject. Each week, we listened to a new tape. We read through the creator of the Gateway Experience tapes, Robert Monroe. We read through his books. We dealt with the controversies. And although I had listened to the tapes almost all the way through in prior years, I only made it to about wave 5 and dabbled into wave 6. It wasn't until last year when we really went through the tapes systematically in our Gateway series did I actually listen to all of the tapes. And now, it was very clear that the first 5 waves were truly self-help tapes, right? They were helping us heal our mind, body, and spirit. And along the way, they taught us what I like to say is white magic. This was a scientific way for us to learn healing white magic. And after wave 5, we started to see with wave 6, but really in wave 7 and 8, this dramatic turn away from self-help to where now we were learning to help others who had recently passed away. Now, amazingly, and we know that this wasn't just a coincidence because we don't believe in coincidences, but right as that transition began in the tapes. Again, this was the very first time that I had come to realize that the tapes took this dramatic turn away from self-help and helping others who have recently passed away. Right as that occurred, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And before the end of that series, Mother Mind War had passed away. This was very, I don't want to say difficult. It wasn't difficult for me to wrap my mind around. It was confirming all of the work that we were doing. It made it real. It made me realize something more was happening than just a little bit of meditation. This was truly manifesting something in my life, manifesting these dramatic changes that I guess I needed. One of the things that we're going to find throughout this series as we learn magic in its many forms is what I realized, okay? So a lot of times when we think of manifestation, we create our vision board, right? With all the things that we want on it. A big house and fast cars and beautiful women and riches and fame and all of those type of things that we think we want. But once we start to actually do magic, and we start to implement the things that we've learned here in this series on magic and in the series on the Gateway Experience tapes, what we're going to find is that the universe, the absolute, God, if you will, it provides us with what we truly needed. So for me, I find myself as part of this transformation after my mother had passed away. I am now living with my father almost full time, right? And it's amazing. It truly is. He is such a sweet and loving and kind man, very funny. It's been really great. It's difficult because it was the passing of my mother that allowed this to occur, but something good has come from this, right? And what I found is that I've had this deep down in my soul desire to spend time with my father my entire life. When I was a child, Dad worked, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, if not more, right? He traveled the world building giant factories from Mexico to Spain to Germany to Korea. And, he worked his ass off. And because of that, he was, I don't want to say absent. He definitely wasn't an absent father. He just was very busy. And of course, when he came home, he was always working on some kind of project, right? So in my childhood and teenage years, I didn't get to spend as much time with him as I had hoped. And then, of course, in my 20s and 30s, when I joined the United States Marine Corps and spent 20 years working for them, I lived in Southern California, literally the opposite side of the country. It's pretty much as far away as I could get from my hometown here in Michigan. I went as far away as I could in the continental United States. And then when I returned home, after being gone for 20 years, I've been home for about 5 years now, maybe more. Gosh, almost 7 years. Sorry. Time flies. I was able to spend quite a bit of time with my parents, but, eventually it got down to where I was just visiting once a week for maybe an hour, and we just talked for a little bit and that was it. And there wasn't much to our relationship, to be honest. And that was kind of sad. I finally had come home. I'd hoped to spend more time with them, but it just didn't pan out. But now that Mother has passed, I get to spend that time with my father. And, I think I mentioned it in the last season. Dad has been diagnosed with end-stage dementia. So we have some difficulties there. But, again, like I said, he's a very sweet man, and I am a very patient man. I answer his questions 10 times a day if that's what it takes. But there is still a very bright and intelligent and fun man there. And I've heard some amazing stories, and it's been really great. But this was just one part of this transformation, this transition that my life has went through since I started doing magic. And again, we are coming up on the 3.5 year, the midway mark of this 7-year art project. And it took me years to get to this major transformation, where the magic gave me what I needed, not necessarily what I thought I wanted. So again, that's only one part of it, because remember, right before Mother's cancer diagnosis, just days before, my friend Callie, this was the lady that I met in California, so we're going to call her Callie. My friend Callie and her newly minted human came to visit me for 1 week. And we went and visited my parents twice that week. The first visit, again, just maybe an hour. It was very pleasant. Everything was fine. But I spoke to my mom after that first visit, and, just like with all the other women in my life, my mother made it very clear that she wasn't a big fan of Callie. So once again, I find myself, growing fond of a woman that my mother was going to reject, that she was never going to truly welcome. And this has happened my entire life, folks. And to be honest, I was getting sick and fucking tired of it. Now, like I said, during that week that Callie came to visit, and again, this was the week of Halloween in October 2024, something changed in that second visit. We went to visit a second time. Again, I think we just had dinner. And as we went to leave, we were going to give hugs and say goodbye to each other. But Mom said, I'm just not feeling very well. I don't think I should give everyone a hug. I don't want to get anyone sick. And it was just a few days later that she got her cancer diagnosis. And within 3 months, she had passed away. And within just a few weeks after that, Callie and her newly minted human have moved here to Michigan with me. So Callie and we'll call her the Moon Princess. Callie and the Moon Princess live here in the Mind War Estates now. It's beautiful, wonderful to be back here in the Mind War Studios because, again, I have been staying with my father at the Mind War Manor. You saw that I was doing episodes from the manor while I was caring for Mother in her final days. But now I get to, come back here to the studio and record, which is great. So, again, these major transformations have occurred. I didn't realize that this is what my life needed. To spend more time and care with my father in his advanced age. And I had really, over the last 3 years, because I had lived by myself for such a long time, I had really, came to the conclusion and understanding and thought that I was going to spend the rest of my life alone. I never thought that I would fall in love again, have a partner again, right? And, there was no thought that I would actually be helping raise another young one. But here I am. Now, this has caused a little bit of conflict with me internally because I find myself and my hardened heart starting to melt a little bit, folks. I find myself with those feelings of love and happiness and contentment once again. Something I haven't felt in quite a long time, so it's a little unnerving, but I want to promise you folks this. I have not lost my edge. I am still just as angry. I am still just as manic as ever. And I will do my best to convey that through these episodes because I know it makes them a little more entertaining. So, really what we're going to explore in this series on magic is all the steps in the processes in the things that I learned and practiced that led to these dramatic changes in my life, that led to the true fulfillment of what magic really is. And it's going to be so exciting to share that with you along the way. And just like in the last seasons, in the future or in the past seasons and series here in Mind War, we're going to be working through a book. And I think before we get to that book, we need to take just a minute to review some of the books that we've already worked through. So when we return, we're going to do a quick review of what we've done already, and then we're going to get into the book that we'll be working with in this series on magic. Okay, welcome back, folks. So in Mind War Season 1, we worked on the book that is the namesake of the podcast, and that is a book titled Mind War. Now, that's my sticker that I put on the cover, so, don't take that out of context, but this book is titled Mind War, and the author is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino. Now, one of the things that we do here in the Mind War podcast that's very important is we look for information in all the places that they told us not to look. In all the books that they say that are evil, or the authors are evil, things like that. They say these books are, it's occult, it's hidden knowledge, it's forbidden knowledge. You shouldn't even read these books. And we dive deep into them. We get past the conspiracies of the information in the book. We get past the conspiracies of the author. And with Mind War, it was no different. Mind War is an amazing book, okay? It was written by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino, a psychological operations officer in the United States Army. And he was tasked with reviewing the psychological operations of the Vietnam War and providing an updated version of what PSYOPs should be in the future. The current future that we are living. And I believe that all of the PSYOPs that we are currently living through, which are so many, you can't even count them, right? I think that they are rooted in the teachings found in this book titled Mind War. So what did we do, right? Because we're not looking to go out and do psychological operations on the world. No, we're here for self-help. Right? The Mind War podcast is ultimately a self-help podcast. So we took all of the amazing teachings that we found in the book titled Mind War, these psychological operations that were meant to be hoisted upon the world, and we took those teachings and we directed them inward personally. Okay? So we learned things like the aristos, the best possible scenario for our current situation. Okay, so what does that mean? We all find ourselves in a situation. Situations are those things that we can't get out of, right? This is just what life is at the moment, right? You may find yourself, if you're a young person, you might find yourself living at home with your parents. That's your situation, and you can't get out of it because you're not old enough to move out yet. If you are a middle-aged person, right, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it may be, and you find yourself, you're married with children and you have a job and a mortgage, and one day you kind of awaken to all of this and you say, this is my situation. I can't get out of it. So the aristos, what we learn here in Mind War is to create the best possible scenario within that situation. Again, if you find yourself in a situation you can't change, you can at least change the scenario of it. How can you make your time in that situation better? How can you make it something that's going to be productive and good for you? So again, those are some of the things that we took away from Mind War. There's so much great information in this book, but most people are never going to read this book because the author, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino, has so many conspiracies and controversies surrounding him. Again, he was the co-founder of the Satanic Church along with Anton LaVey. and the founder of the Temple of Set. Plus, there's all sorts of controversies surrounding him with lawsuits and all sorts of things that occurred. I listened to an interview with him in his very late, I think he was in his late 70s, right? It was great to hear. It was nice to hear him and hear from him, but it was also very sad because the interviewers did ask about the controversies, and it was very sad to have to listen to this old man talk about these, probably unfounded, attacks against him, right? But again, we look past that. We understand that the reason knowledge is hidden is because they don't want us to hear it. And one of the best ways to hide information is to place a layer over top of it of controversy and conspiracy, right? But we don't let those things detract us here. We move forward because we know the information is important. That was the book Mind War. Now, this is a 3-book trilogy, and we didn't read these other 2 books. Maybe in future seasons of Mind War, we can get back to it. But I do want to talk about those other books. So the first one in Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino's 3-book trilogy, again, is called Mind War. Let's start there. Make sure you get that. But the next one is called Mind Star. And so he moves away from the psychological operations outside of the personal side. And I'm going to read the back of this because, again, this is very interesting to think that the author, again, a lieutenant colonel, psyops in the U.S. Army, he's also writing about this. Now listen here. It says the book Mind War, or Mind Star, explores the mystery of the human soul, what it is, how it can be detected, and how it may be creatively and productively activated. Almost exactly like the things that we learned in the Gateway Experience tapes and the Gateway Experience series as we worked through Robert Monroe's books. Included is a historical survey of misapprehensions, misuses, and outright rejections of this central, crucial, metaphysical core of human existence. The soul, or mind star, as redefined herein, is the key to the individual conscious immortality. I think we learned about immortality quite a bit in the Gateway series. The author's companion book, Mind War, details the thought architecture, which is subject to natural and artificial manipulation, subconscious pattern, and conscious algorithmic thinking. Mind Star addresses metaphysical, conceptual thought, which is independent of such influence. Another very important book, the second book of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino's 3-book series titled Mind War. This book, the second book, is titled Mind Star. And the third book in that trilogy is called Find Far, another amazing book. In this one, let's see. Find Far is the 3rd volume in the series, which began with Mind War in 2013 and continued with Mind Star in 2016. The first book introduced a practical technology for reducing, if not completely eliminating, the scourge of physical warfare afflicting humanity by neutralizing violent irrationality in the human subconscious and replacing it with the impulse to creative cooperation integrated with a new framework for international problem solving, reverse engineered to eliminate crises preemptively. That's right. One of the goals of Mind War is to eliminate physical war. And we do that through psychological operations where we convince the enemy it's not even worth fighting. There's so many other things that we can do in life besides kill each other. Unfortunately, the world still needs to learn those lessons. Whereas Mind War concentrates exclusively on the physical machinery of the human brain, Mind Star adds the missing element of metaphysical identity. what humans until now have only vaguely sensed as the soul. Now, this genius at the core of every sentient being is brought into full illumination and definition as the mind star. And finally, Find Far completes this evolutionary adventure by superseding old, static, three-dimensional analysis and planning with the fourth-dimensional mind war dynamic of Find Far, changing the future from reactive to active and adding the fifth dimension of individual creative perspective enabled by the mind star. Another amazing book. And what Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino does in this three-book trilogy as you move through Mind Star and Find Far is almost, again, right in line with what we learned from Robert Monroe as we talked about removing the societal, cultural, and religious wet blankets off of our soul, off of our mind. We are removing all of the lies that we've been taught. All of the things that stifle our creativity, stifle our natural inclinations, right? We remove those things. And it's amazing hearing men like this talk about these type of things. It's very important because no change is going to occur if we can't move past the lies that we've been told. And that's one of the biggest parts of the Mind War podcast, is we have to move past those societal, cultural, and religious wet blankets, right? We got to take them off. That's the only way that we can heal the mind, body, and spirit from the organizations, corporations, and institutions that pollute our minds, poison our bodies, and corrupt our souls. That's what we're doing here as mind warriors, citizen samurais, guerrilla gurus, and warrior monks. Mind War, Season 1. We worked through the book Mind War. Now, bear with me one moment. Season 2, we worked through the book First Earth Battalion. Now, the author, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Shannon, again, another lieutenant colonel in the PSYOPs, Psychological Operations Units of the United States Army. Interesting. Okay. This book not as controversial. The author not as controversial. And this book probably would have, slipped into obscurity if it wasn't for the book or the movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. That's right. Go watch that movie, folks. The Men Who Stare at Goats. George Clooney, a lot of other big names. Jeff Bridges, I think, is in it. Great movie. And what you're going to see is not only do they discuss the contents of the First Earth Battalion book, but they also don't necessarily directly come out and say that they are listening to the Gateway Experience tapes and using the tools that are taught there, but it's heavily implied throughout the movie. And you're going to see and hear them say certain terms that only came from the Gateway tapes. It's really an amazing movie. And it's interesting, again, how they hide these things right in plain sight. So that was Season 2 of the Mind War podcast. We worked through the book First Earth Battalion, starting in Season 3. Okay, so 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, my apologies for making it so confusing. I look back on all the seasons and the different episodes and the different tape numbers. Very confusing. So the Gateway Experience tape series, the Gateway Experience series here on the Mind War podcast starts in Season 3 and goes through Season 6. It's almost an entire year. And to be honest, the goal, once we're done here with this series on magic, which should also take us about a year, the best way to do it is to listen to both sides simultaneously. Because again, with the Gateway Experience series, we are learning white magic through science. And with the series on magic that we're doing now, we are going to learn ritual and ceremonial magic and spirituality, right? Through our practice, okay? So again, starting in Season 3, the Gateway Experience series, we read through the creator of the Gateway Experience tapes, Robert Monroe. We read through his books, right? Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journey. 3 amazing books. Such a great series. I think what occurred during the Gateway Experience series on the Mind War podcast may be one of the most dynamic pieces of media that the world has ever known. And I know it's not going to ever be recognized for that. But those of you who are watching, I think you understand what happened and how powerful and dramatic that series truly was, right? And then we finished up that series with analysis and assessment of the Gateway process, right? So this was a report done by the Department of Defense, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonald. And this is the report that was released by the CIA. So you see this report talked about all over social media whenever they talk about the Gateway Experience tapes. They're often referring to this because it has connections to the intelligence agency and all of those type of words and phrases. Those really catch the algorithm, and a lot of people watch those videos. Now, we didn't sensationalize it, of course. Instead, what we did is what we do best here in the Mind War podcast is we read page by page, word for word, and we got the truth out of this book, and we found some amazing information. Once again, we looked past the conspiracies, past the controversies, and we found the information. And that brings us to the book that we're going to be working on in this series on magic. And we're going to get into that book in just a moment. Welcome back, folks. Before I tell you the name of the book that we're going to be working on in this Mind War series on magic, I want to tell you first how I came to find this book. I think this is very important. As you know, I listen to hours of podcasts daily. I'm constantly listening to podcasts. And it's kind of a fire hose approach to information where you're constantly getting new information, whether it's podcasts, videos on YouTube, reading books, doing research, right? I know we're not supposed to do our own research. In fact, it's probably going to be illegal soon to do your own research. But I was listening to a podcast, and what's important, the reason I want to say this is because small pieces of information are going to be found in that fire hose of info. It's kind of like panning for gold, right? You have this pan full of mud and water, and you're sloshing it around, and you're rinsing it out slowly, and all of a sudden at the end, after all of this diligent hard work, you find these tiny nuggets of gold. And that's the same thing with information. Sometimes it takes hours, days, weeks, months of researching to find something that's truly important and worth really diving into. And so for this book, the way that I found it is I was listening to an amazing podcast called No More News with Adam Green. Okay. For those of you, I'm going to go on a little tangent here for Adam because his show is so awesome. Okay. For those of you who are still struggling with the Judeo-Christian Islamic paradigm, if you find yourself to be in one of the Abrahamic religions and you are trying to escape it mentally, emotionally, personally, right? One of the struggles that I had throughout my life was struggling to believe. And then when I lied to myself enough and said, you are a believer, then it took a long time to remove that lie, right? First, I struggled to believe. Then when I kind of convinced myself that I was a believer, I had to remove that lie from myself. But then I still was caught in this idea of, the book and everything is still real. I just don't believe in it. It doesn't mean anything to me. Adam takes it to the next step. Again, his last name is Green, and he says take the green pill. And when you take the green pill, what you realize is the whole story is a lie. The whole biblical story is a lie. Whether Old Testament, New Testament, Quran, whatever it is, it's all fake nonsense. And when you make that realization and allow it to sink into your life, especially if you are someone who has struggled with the Abrahamic faiths, with the Judeo-Christian Islamic paradigm, it's amazingly freeing. It frees so much of your soul and your heart and your personality to no longer live in the fear of those lies of that fairy tale. So again, No More News is great. Adam does an amazing job at breaking down the realities of the fairy tale and those who promote it. And he has clips that are so interesting from the leaders of religions and how just insane their beliefs are and how much they truly hate all of us who are non-believers and what they want to have done to us. The threats they make against us, it should be criminal, what they say. It's amazing. Again, that is No More News with Adam Green. I implore you, as soon as you're done watching the Mind War podcast, that should be the next episode you're watching. Is over there, No More News. I think you can find it on Odyssey and Rumble and nomorenews.org. Great podcast, okay? So Adam, on one of his episodes, and I went back and tried to find it. I'm sorry, I couldn't find it, folks. He has so many episodes, and this was years ago that I saw this episode, okay? It's been years that I've been reading and studying from the book that we're going to be working on. Adam interviewed an author named Stephen Flowers. And while he was in the interview, he mentioned the name of the book and the author that we're going to be working through. But when he mentioned it, he kind of muffled his words. There was a little bit of audio, and I just couldn't clearly understand what he said. And I tried so hard, and I searched so many different times for, what I thought the book title was and what I thought the author's name was, and just nothing came up, right? But in that episode of No More News, Stephen Flowers told Adam Green, hey, I'm coming out with a new book. And in that book is where he talks more about the author in the book that we're going to be working from. Now, oh boy. I want everyone, again, like we've talked about in this episode, the books that we've worked through, the information found in them, and the authors and the conspiracies surrounding the books, we had to get pushed past all of that stuff. We pushed past the conspiracies, we pushed past the controversies, and we got to the real heart of the information, which is crucial. The occult information, the hidden information, right? Sorry. And we're doing it again with this book, okay? So before we get into that, I think it's important for everyone to freak out right now, okay? I want everyone to scream. I want everyone to holler. I want you to turn off the podcast. I want you to say you're never going to listen again. I want you to say all sorts of mean things about me and who you think I might be and people like us and how studying this kind of information is awful and scary and how dare you, because that's going to be the thoughts of a lot of people who see this. Not the Mind Warriors, Citizen Samurais, Guerrilla Gurus, and Warrior Monks here in the Mind War podcast. We are smarter than that. We are more intelligent than that. We can move past the controversies and the BS and get to the heart of the matter. So with that, the first book that I'm going to show you is the book that author Stephen Flowers wrote and was promoting on the episode of No More News with Adam Green, okay? And that book, folks, is titled The Occult in National Socialism. Everybody freak out. Freak out. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. National Socialism. Everybody knows what that is, right? Right? This book is a definitive book on occultism within Nazism, right? The author here does an amazing job at bringing the truths of, so many, again, of the conspiracies and controversies surrounding Nazis and this possible connection to the occult. I think he makes it fairly clear that the majority of people who considered themselves to be part of the Nazi Party weren't necessarily occultists. And, there definitely were people who were practicing the occult, but he downplays it quite a bit in this book. I don't know how accurate that downplaying is, but there's some very interesting information in here, okay? But this book is not the one that we're going to be working from. Again, within this book, we find the book that we're going to be working from and the author, okay? And so I think before we get to that book, we need to work through what Stephen Flowers wrote about that book and the author, okay? And we are going to do that in the next episode of the Mind War podcast as we go into magic, okay? So I know this was just an introductory. We're just getting started, folks, okay? I know this was maybe a little shorter episode, right? But it's important that we methodically work our way through this. I appreciate you being back today to start this series on magic. This is really awesome, okay? And in our next episode, we're going to read through this book and we're going to find out which book that we're going to be working from in our series on magic. We're going to learn a little bit about the author and his connection to possibly some of the most nefarious people in history. Okay? And just like we've done with all the other books, we're going to push past the conspiracies. We're going to push past the lore and the controversies, and we're going to get down to the real information. I'm so excited that all of you are back. I appreciate you allowing me to take a short hiatus after what had been one of the most intense years of my life. It is currently mid-April as I record this. The sun is starting to shine. Flowers are starting to bloom. The buds on the trees. The birds are singing. I look forward to a beautiful spring and a long, hot summer as we work through magic. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a lot of fun because in our last episode, in our last series, especially the Gateway Experience series, we had to throttle back a little bit because I wanted to ensure that we honored Robert Monroe and his team at the Monroe Institute and his family. They're good people. And I wanted to make sure that I did the best of my ability to honor them and not get too wild, right? But I think with this series, with the book that we're going to be working from and the author and maybe some of his connections, those gloves are off, right? We don't have to worry about honoring their lives. I think in some ways these were good men, right? Don't get me wrong. But I think we can be even more honest and truthful and really express ourselves even more in this series, and that's going to be awesome. So we're going to do a deeper dive in our next episode when we get back, right? It's going to be great. This is the beginning of another year-long series on magic. This is one that we've been waiting for, and I'm so excited to share with you because, again, these things, so many of these are things that I learned. These are things that we didn't get to take directly from another book or learn from a tape. These are things that I learned as I practiced them. one after another, these things would come to me, and we would add them to our magic toolkit. And it's going to be so exciting to share that because it's very personal. But it reaches back to very simplistic teachings that you're going to realize were hidden right in front of you this whole time. That's occultism, right, folks? So, again, I appreciate you being here. And as always, remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.